House Oversight Committee Chairman, South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy. Congressman, good evening. Great to have you here, as always. So let me start with the FBI and the email investigation. What is new there that causes a new look at this?
I think the most recent new thing is the allegation that Director Comey or the Bureau may have made up their mind in May of 2016, whereas they announced their decision in July. So they interviewed 24 witnesses after they had already made up their minds. That's the allegation. But Martha, it's more than that. There were Democrats that were really unhappy with the Department of Justice last fall. There were Republicans that were unhappy earlier in the year. And that's the one entity that everyone has to have confidence in. Even if you disagree with the decisions that are reached, you have to understand those decisions and you have to have confidence that they were apolitical. So Chairman Gillette and I came up with really 6 questions that we think are pretty evenly divided in terms of what Democrats want to know and what Republicans and the Department of Justice is not above scrutiny, and they're not above review. I have great respect for them, but they're not above scrutiny. In 2016, in my opinion, left a lot of unanswered questions for the department.
Yeah, I know one of those is why the Hillary Clinton investigation was discussed and the Trump investigation in terms of the possibility of Russian collusion was not discussed. But in terms of what you just mentioned and the political aspect of this, is there any evidence that Loretta Lynch made a phone call, that she asked anyone before she took that meeting with Bill Clinton on the tarmac?
If there's evidence of that, Martha, I haven't seen it, and it has not been brought to my attention. But you put your finger on exactly why you need to have investigations. You need to come up with a list of witnesses, and of course she's on that witness list, and then you need to access the documents. Again, you and I are having this conversation because someone sought to access documents from the Department of Justice. So you do all of that, and then you do your interviews, transcribed interviews, which is my preferred way of doing it, and whatever you learn, you share in a public forum. But you don't start with public hearings, you end with public hearings. You have to do the hard work of investigating before you get to that point.
And in terms of that, do you expect that you will have access to anyone at the FBI who may have been privy to the writing of the Jim Comey draft when he started to put that together 2 months before reaching his conclusion about Hillary Clinton?
Well, that's a really good question, and that's going to be up to the Department of Justice. And so far, in some instances, we have gotten no better cooperation from the current Department of Justice than we did their predecessor. So that remains to be seen, whether or not the Department of Justice is cooperative. I would remind them of this. Congress created them, Congress funds them, and no entity is above oversight. I get oversight done on me every 2 years for sure, and more frequently than that, the Department of Justice is not above having to explain the decisions they reach or do not reach. And it doesn't have to be adversarial. But so far, it's been really difficult to get information from this Department of Justice, and I would recommend that they change that posture.
That's interesting. Here's Hillary Clinton and her reaction to the reopening of these 2 investigations.
I would say it's the same baloney they've been peddling for years, and there's been no credible evidence by anyone. In fact, it's been debunked repeatedly and will continue to be debunked.
She and others, other Democrats on the Hill, Representatives Cummings and Representative Conyers, are both suggesting that this is just, haze being thrown at the Russia investigation in an effort to distract from the Trump investigation.
Well, I would tell Secretary Clinton and Mr. Conyers and Mr. Cummings, Republicans don't get to write the headlines. We don't get to decide what the media covers and what they don't cover. God knows they've been covering Russia since January. I spent all day in a skiff interviewing witnesses related to the Russia investigation. So I don't know where Mr. Conyers or Mr. Cummings or Secretary Clinton were today, but I know where I was, which is investigating allegations of collusion. So I'm at peace with what I'm doing, but Congress is actually capable of doing more than one investigation at a time. And there was a time when Democrats did not think Jim Comey was the second coming of Christ. Remember, last fall, Harry Reid wanted him prosecuted for a Hatch Act violation.
Sure do. Yeah,
so
it has cut both ways.
I don't know where this...
I got to go, but before I go, have you found any evidence of collusion on the Trump-Russia collusion investigation?
Well, I'm going to be really careful not to do what I think the Department of Justice did, which is draw a conclusion before the end of the investigation. It's still ongoing. To date, there has not been a single witness who has provided a single piece of evidence supporting collusion, coordination, or conspiracy, but we are not through with the investigation.
Well, that opens up a lot of questions about the dossier, which we will save for another day,
Yes,
and another interesting conversation with you, as always. Congressman Trey.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. It's been nearly 4 weeks since Stephen Paddock committed the deadliest shooting in modern American history. Tonight we have brand new exclusive information from a government source given to us just hours ago, and it's remarkable. The Las Vegas security guard, the only eyewitness to this shooting, left this country shortly after it took place. We'll tell you where he went and what it may mean in just a minute. But first, the law of unintended consequences remains in force in Washington tonight. An investigation designed to uncover Republican collusion with a foreign power has unearthed just the opposite. We now know that the most powerful Democratic lobbying firm in Washington was at the very center of Russian efforts to shape American politics and policy. The Podesta Group, founded by Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman and his brother, took money from Russian interests to influence the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton's State Department. It turns out there were indeed Russian agents in Washington. They were working with Democrats. Meanwhile, we have also solved much of the mystery around the infamous Trump dossier, that collection of salacious and in many cases totally made-up allegations that BuzzFeed credulously ran earlier this year as a news story. The dossier was assembled by a former British intelligence agent called Chris Steele. Steele was originally paid by a still anonymous Republican donor who was hoping to undermine the Trump campaign during the primaries. We've known that for a while. But what we've just learned, and what has turned this story and Washington itself on its head, is that once the Republican primaries finished, the Trump dossier project was funded by Hillary Clinton's own presidential campaign and also by the DNC. Democrats have been lying about that explicitly for more than a year, but it's true, it turns out. Hillary's former spokesman conceded on television tonight that Hillary herself may have known about it because, of course, she did. More shocking, though, the FBI apparently may have also paid Chris Steele to dig up dirt on Trump. How did they do this? Why did they do this? We still don't know, because so far the FBI has ignored subpoenas sent to them 2 months ago by House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes. We'll be talking to him later in the show. All of this raises some serious questions. First and most important, is it even legal? There are a number of federal laws that prohibit politicians from paying foreign nationals for campaign work, yet Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee apparently paid Chris Steele for that dossier. Isn't that against the law? Presumably, we'll find out fairly soon. Next, why was the FBI involved in this in the way that it was? The agency has 35,000 employees. It's got unmatched resources and expertise. It's the FBI. Why would it even consider going to a private investigator to do research on a president-elect? Keep in mind, this isn't the first time the FBI has outsourced a major investigation. Recall that federal agents never actually examined the DNC servers after they were supposedly hacked by an outside party during the campaign. Instead, the FBI relied on the work of a DNC contractor called CrowdStrike, which assured them and the rest of us that Russia was behind that hacking. But wait, why would the FBI do that? Did anyone at the Justice Department consider that hiring third-party actors with unclear motives to conduct a high-profile investigation might be an excellent way for, say, foreign intelligence operations to sow chaos and promote their agendas? At the very least, wouldn't CrowdStrike's claims be colored by their natural desire to make their employer, the Democratic Party, happy? It's nuts. And by the way, by working so closely with a group conducting partisan research for a partisan political campaign, didn't the FBI compromise its political independence, its all-important political independence? Another thing, to conduct research for the dossier, Chris Steele had extensive contact, of course he did, with Russian sources, some of them connected to the Kremlin directly. So if the Clinton campaign was paying for Steele's research, why weren't they, in effect, colluding with Russia? Irony of ironies. And maybe most important of all, why is the FBI refusing to answer basic questions from Congress? Our government is not supposed to work like that. The FBI is not its own country. It's not a private organization. It isn't elected by voters. It has no inherent legitimacy except to the extent it obeys the laws that citizens, you and me, voted for. The FBI can't decide to ignore the Congress of the United States. That's obstruction. It's also scary. If federal agents with guns aren't accountable to the Congress or to the president they work for, who are they accountable to? Who's really in charge? Suddenly, you're looking at something resembling an occupying army and not a legitimate federal agency. And that's when things start to fall apart.